Okay, so we are going to be looking at 6G from the Unit 1 and 2 Cambridge Methods textbook. So this involves us learning to solve cubic inequalities. So let's look at the first question. We're going to solve the cubic inequality when we've got x minus 2, x plus 1, and x plus 4 for when it's greater than 0. So for this, I really want us to be able to link it back to graphing because graphing makes it a lot easier. So that's why we're going to start by finding the x-intercepts. And we know with null factor law and what we've already covered, our intercepts will be when x minus 2 equals 0, x plus 1 is 0, and x plus 4 equals 0. If I get x by itself, I will then have an intercept at 2, -1, and -4. If I identify the y-intercept, for the y-intercept, x must be 0. So I've got -2 times 1 times 4, and that gives me -8. And if I then use a sign diagram, I'm using my x-intercepts, and I pick a point on either side. So I'll start off with over here, so -5. So if I've got -5 take away 2 is a negative. -5 plus 1 is a negative. -5 plus 4 is a negative. So negative and a negative is a positive. Positive and a negative is a negative. I'll go to the next part and look for a number between -4 and -1. So I'll just clear this. So for that, I'll just pick -2. -2 take away 2 is -4. That's negative. -2 plus 1 is a negative. -2 plus 4 is a positive. So a negative and negative is a positive and positive is a positive. So straight away here we've got it in the positive area. Then I need to look at the next part, and it's between -1 and 2. So again, I'm just going to pick 0. So 0 take away 2 is negative. 0 plus 1 is positive, and 0 plus 4 is positive. So that will give me a negative. And I can do the next one and it'll just give me a positive. So now I've got this, I'm just going to graph it, just those points, and we're going to talk about applying the inequalities. So for this, we don't need to graph it. I've just done it so it's easier for us to see. Okay, so now we need to understand what this is. So this part here, what I'm underlining, my whole function here, this is equal to my y value. So what it's actually saying is y is greater than 0. So for this, I only need to look at the top part. So that means I'm looking at this part here. So when is it going to be greater than 0? So it's going to be greater than 0 between -4 and -1, and it's going to be greater than 0 from 2 to infinity. So we can see that through this sign diagram. If you need to draw the graph, you're more than welcome to as well. So then we write it. When x is negative is equal to is greater than -4 and less than -1, union greater than 2 to infinity. Make sure it's round because it can't be equal. Because if it's equal, then then it is equal to 0, but it can't be. Let's look at the next part. X plus 3 in brackets squared, x minus 1 is equal to and less than 0. So the first thing is finding the x-intercepts. In this case here, we've got x plus 3 equals 0, and we've got x minus 1 equals 0. So that gives us two intercepts, -3 and 1. We know it's a turning point is going to be on the x-axis. So, and that will be at x equals -3. Identify the y-intercept. So again, To make the y-intercept, I need to make x 0. So that will give me 3 squared times -1, which is -9. For creating a sign diagram, I'm just going to have 2 points. So I'll have -3 and 1. So on my left-hand side, I'm just going to say pick -4. -4 plus 3 gives me a negative. But remember, this is a square, so it's negative and a negative. And then x minus 1, so -4, take away 1, and that gives me a negative. So that means when x is less than -3, we have a negative. Now, let's look at the next part. So that's when we've got between -3 and 1. So in this case here, let's pick 0. If x is 0, 0 plus 3, that's positive. 0 take away 1 is negative. So that means I'm going to have a negative. So, and we did say this was going to be a turning point. So it's why it's negative, negative. Then we look at the last part, 1. So I'll pick 2. I'll rub that off. Erase. Okay. So now if I've got, say, 2, 2 plus 3 is positive. 2 take away 1 is positive. So my answer is going to be positive. Now, we also said before that our function here is equal to y. So it's really saying at the moment that y is equal to or less than 0. So it's really focusing on this part here. I can graph it to actually visualize it. So it can be equal to x is 1 or less than. And that's what we've got here, where it says x is negative infinity, comma 1 with a rectangular bracket to say it is equal to. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We've got x cubed, take away 3x squared minus 4x is equal to or less than 0. First step is we're just going to identify the x-intercepts. So I will factor out the x. So that means I've got x, and then I've got x squared minus 3x, take away 4, is equal to or less than 0. I will use my understanding of factorizing a monic quadratic. So AC is -4 and B is -3. So I need two numbers that times together to equal -4 and add up to my B value. So that must be 1 and -4, because 1 times -4 is -4, and -4 plus 1 equals -3. So that gives me it in factorized form now. So this allows me to see my x-intercepts are 0, 4, and -1. That's just using my understanding of null factorial. Then we're going to identify the y-intercept. This is not really necessary for solving a polynomial inequality, but I am just going through it so we get used to being able to see it on the graph. So that means identify the y-intercept, we make x equals 0, and we're just solving. So we know it's going to be 0. We already knew that because we had an x-intercept at 0 as well. We create the sign diagram based on our three x-intercepts of -1, 0, and 4, and we plug in a value. And we use this form right here. Let's look at -2. That means this is negative. If x is -2, -2 take away 4 is negative, and -2 plus 1 is negative. So straight away, that tells me I'm starting off with a negative. Then between -1 and 0, let's pick -1/2. I've got a negative. -1/2 take away 4 is negative, and -1/2 plus 1 is positive. That means negative, negative is a positive, and a positive is a positive. So now I need to pick a number from 0 to 4. So I'll pick 1. 1 starts off being positive. 1 take away 4 is negative. 1 plus 1 is positive. So that has to be a negative, a positive, a negative, and a positive. And finally, I'll just clear this so I've got easy to look at. Okay, okay. So, and then I'll pick a number bigger than 4. So 5. 5 is positive. 5 take away 4 is positive. And 5 plus 1 is positive. So it goes into the positive area. Straight away, we know x cubed take away 3x squared, take away 4x is our y. So it's saying our y is equal to or less than 0. So that means, if I'll get the highlighter this time, I'm caring about this area here. So that means that our x value will be to negative infinity and all the way up to negative 4 and equal to, so rectangular bracket, and equal to 0 up until 4 and equal to 4. I can draw that on a graph, and I can also write it down here, which is what I just said. So graphing is a good tool for us to visualize and see it, but the main thing I want you to take out of this is that sign diagram helps you understand what part of the equation are we actually looking at. Last question that we are going to go through, and we've got x cubed take away 2x squared take away 3x is less than 0. So let's look at finding the x-intercepts. So I will factor out an x, and then I'll use my understanding of factorizing a monoquadratic by two numbers at times together to equal ac, which is -3, and add up to b, which is -2. It has to be -3 and 1. From that, I can rewrite it because it's monic. I don't need to do the groupings. I can see the pattern. So that means that I've got x minus 3 in brackets, x plus 1 in brackets is equal to or less than 0. That gives us our x-intercepts by using null factor law as 0, 3, and -1. I don't need to, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'll identify the y-intercept, and that is by substituting x as 0, which of course gives me 0, and I already knew that by having an x-intercept at 0. Okay, this is the key part that we need to take out, which is creating a sign diagram. So the sign diagram, I've got my x-intercepts as -1, 0, and 4. And I'll pick a value. So I'm just going to pick a value on the left-hand side of -1. So I'll say -2. I will use my factorize form to do this. If x is -2, that is a negative. -2 take away 3 is negative. -2 plus 1 is negative. So that means it'll be on the negative side. Negative and a negative is a positive. Positive and a negative is a negative. I then move on to a number between -1 and 0. And I just realized that when I wrote this, I'm just going to change this 3 here. That's 4 to a 3. So I just kept that from the previous slide. Okay, so let's pick -1/2. That is the negative. -1/2 take away 3 is negative, and -1/2 plus 1 is positive. So I go into the positive area. Then I move on to the next part. And again, I'm going to pick a number between 0 and 3. I'll just pick 1. So 1 is positive. 1 take away 3 is negative. 1 plus 1 is positive. So that it leaves me in the negative area because a positive and a positive is a positive. A positive and a negative is a negative. Finally, I then look at the last part, which is I pick a number greater than 3. So let's just pick 4. So 4 is positive. 4 take away 3 is positive. 4 plus 1 is positive. So it goes into the positive area. This tells me straight away on what I am looking for. So I'll go back up to my original equation. This is my function, so that's y, and it's saying y is less than 0. So I go back to what I've got down here, and it says if y is less than 0, then I'm looking at this area here underneath. I can draw my graph if needed, but because I'm only looking at that area underneath, I can write it as x is negative infinity all the way to -1, but not inclusive, union, not inclusive of 0 to 3, not inclusive.